This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And I am so excited to welcome to our global community today somebody whose name you might be familiar with because she was one of my amazing guests on the brilliant live show that I hosted in November 2024 in Birmingham. And there were so many takeaways, and we had such brilliant feedback both on the night and when we shared the YouTube video that I thought it would be remiss of me not to get her on this show so that it's an evergreen episode because I would beg you to go and find another leader who is as honest, truthful, and down to earth in her journey of her business so far. So without further ado, please welcome Emma Devereux, who is the founder of Maintech Recruitment. Welcome to you today, Emma.
Hi, Alicia.
Nice to have you back. So
Yeah, thanks for having
you
me.
I was going to say you were a brilliant guest on our panel show in Birmingham, and you were really honest and truthful. I think you were actually, if I remember rightly, you were struggling with a really bad cough and cold at the time, and you were very stoical throughout the whole thing. I'm pleased to see that you're feeling a lot better. So there will be people that are not familiar with you. You've got a really incredible journey because you started your business in COVID, didn't you? So just tell us a little bit about your journey to that, and then tell us about your business.
Sure. So it was literally mid-COVID. I thought, when I handed my notice in the August of 2020, I thought we were done, like COVID was finished.
Mhm.
And so I'd gone back off maternity leave to the job that I was in, and kind of knew that there wasn't a lot it felt difficult going back into the business. So I'd started looking for a new role. COVID, the first round of COVID obviously then hit. And I think as a leader now I look back and go, actually Ruth went through a really unprecedented, really tricky time, and fair play to her, hats off as a leader. She did the best in a really awful situation. And I think you when you're on your journey as a leader, you look back and go, from an employee's point of view, it felt unfair. Actually, from a leader's point of view, I get it now. So handed my notice in the August, started on the 1st of October 2020, had 3 months of kind of really just really kind of trying to get it up and running and, cold calling and doing all of that to win new business. I didn't want to take anything from my old clients, and really wanting to honour my covenants with Ruth. Kind of just got it all up and running, and then obviously January the 4th we got locked down again. That was
Good.
fun. Just taken on my first member of staff at that point. But you know what? We just saw it through. And I think probably similar to the market that we're in now. People will still need to move jobs. Companies will still need to hire. Um,
Absolutely.
this market, I think, this is probably what brings out the best recruiters,
I
in
agree.
my opinion. You've got to be more consultative, and you've got to be more, kind of take people on the journey and help people. So I think, all through COVID, where we weren't as busy as we were, I mean, we were busy, especially in manufacturing and food manufacturing, certainly on our temp side. There was just lots of people that needed help, needed that guidance, needed that support, whether I could help, whether I could place them or not, do a CV review for them and things. I think that's kind of the market that we're back to right now.
Yeah, I definitely think that I'm going to put a pin in that because I think it's
Yeah,
really come back to it. So you just touched on it there. So your market is engineering, manufacturing, food manufacturing.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you'd say, I guess, from all the sectors out there, it's one of the few that is possibly always going to be around because we're always going to need
yeah,
to.
yeah,
And people have to go to factories, whether or not there's a pandemic or, God forbid,
yeah,
nuclear war. However, there's been lots of external factors that will have impacted your industry, not
sure.
least, obviously, Brexit. And
Yeah,
then, as we record this now, we're about to be hit by those NI increases, which has possibly had
yeah.
a detrimental effect as well. So you are steering a ship right from day one through most unbelievable storm. And
Mm,
this is as, can we just make sure, just to bring that context back in, as a new mum
yeah,
in a
yeah.
new
Freddie
business?
too, when I started the business. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, absolute respect and hats off to you. And just to make sure we've got the full context of your whole career, at the point where you launched Main Tech, how long had you been working in your industry for?
3 years,
Right.
which again was probably, a little bit. I think I was probably going through a midlife crisis at that point. So my previous background is estate agency, did 10 years worth of corporate estate agency, which is really similar. You're dealing with people and people's lives. So, the skills that I think estate agents make great recruiters and vice versa. But again, started my estate agency career in March 2008.
Wow,
literally, the market went. And I remember people saying to me, "What are you doing? Why are you going to get that job now?" And again, probably, I was 20 at the time, so really naive, really like.
Yeah, but anyone that's listening now that went through that 0809 horrendous recession will know that we didn't really know what was going on. No one knew what had happened to the Lehman Brothers. It was like, who? What's happened? Okay, what are you talking about? So it literally just kind of crept up on us. Whereas I think those that have, been in recruitment pre-2020 and then have gone through the last sort of 5-6 years, this is nothing compared to that, because we've got information at our fingertips. So I think that's I didn't know that. I think I knew that maybe, but I've forgotten it. But I'm also an estate agent. I did that before recruitment, which was a long time ago. And I've always had anything to do with property management where you're matching people up based on behaviours and what's important. I think it's a great background. And if anyone has got a friend that's in a estate agency and they want to get into recruitment, 100% we want to know about you without a shadow of a doubt.
Absolutely.
So I put the pin in it in terms of, as we record this, as we're getting to the end of quarter one of 2025, I also think it has been a challenging market. And I like how you positioned that and said, this is the time where we see the true skills of a recruiter.
Yeah.
So, what, as a leader yourself, and you are still a fee-earning recruiter, what do you mean by that? Let's really get nitty-gritty, because I think that people listening can actually maybe just take a step back and reflect on what they're doing to make sure they are being the best that they can in their market.
Yeah, I think, for me, what's worked really well for me is just making sure that I'm just honest, transparent with my clients. We work in a skill short market, and that's been the case since I started 7-8 years ago. Working with your candidate's got choice, but it's really kind of homing in on actually what's important to that candidate. What are the things that that they can't compromise on, that they're never going to change, and then matching that up with businesses. If they want a specific shift pattern and that's not going to be able to, there's no point trying to push them into going and doing something that's not going to work for them and their family. If they need to earn at this level because of monetary, that like their bills, all of that, that's not going to change. The bits that may change is, if I find you a job that's 15 minutes further away from home, but it's everything that you want, I know there's a bit of extra travel there. Will that work for you? And it's kind of really, really understanding people. I am like that typical, like my son is. Why, mummy? Why? Why is that important to you? What is it about? You've just said that the culture of the business isn't good. Explain that to me. What is it that's not ticking your boxes there? What does progression look like? So, for the engineers that we work with, it's not always about stepping into management. Sometimes it's about learning new equipment, learning new skills, and then making sure that when the client is then interviewing them, that they're aware of that. So this is what's important to the candidate. Again, dealing with manufacturing, you get a lot of people that it's, still quite old school, but kind of re-educating them on, look, this is what's important to them. You've got to sell this job as much as, and sell the culture of your business as much as, they've got to sell themselves to you. And I also think those are the bits, we talk loads about AI and bits that are coming in. That's the bit AI is never going to be able to take away. They're never going to.
Totally agree with you. It is. So, there for me, you've basically described curiosity, which I think is a very undervalued human trait that I look for very subconsciously to see, what questions are people naturally asking. And not for the sake of asking, but it's because they genuinely are intrigued. I think the other thing that I've just taken away from what you've just said is that we all, regardless of how long we've been doing this job for, we can go back to the basics. And for me, it's what are the non-negotiables, and then what are the things that you're prepared to compromise on if I come to you with a job that has the absolute essentials. And the third thing, and I think it beggars belief that I often get feedback on my competitors that don't do this. Prepping your client, the hiring employer, in terms of what matters to that candidate is absolutely part of your job. And so many people don't do it. They literally never call the client back once they've agreed the interview to ascertain, what the process is going to be. Let's be honest, we have, from an accessibility point of view, especially if you have neurodivergent candidates, they should have access to what that format looks like. They should have access to, maybe you won't give me specific questions, but roughly what are we going to cover? Because they need that to be able to perform the best of their ability. And then the other aspect is, you are taking somebody's time to interview for that business. Well, let's make the best of that use of that time by preparing you for why this candidate is sat in front of you. And if you just sit there and, talk about, something they're not interested in, it's a waste of everybody's time. So this is why the candidate's sat in front of you. I love that you've covered that off, Emma, because to me, that's what being a consultant is. That's what you've just defined.
And I think that's the difference, isn't it, between recruitment, throwing enough CVs at a client and seeing what sticks, and actually properly consulting. I've got clients now that within this business that I put on from cold calls when I was with Ruth, way back, that will use me every time they need to recruit, because they know that even if we don't fill that role for them, if they fill it themselves or they need to get another agent in because we're not, we can't, we've exhausted our channels, they will still come back to me every time, because they know that actually they'll only get maybe 2 or 3 CVs from us, but they'll interview those people and they'll be good. And again, it's understanding that, isn't it? Understanding the business, but also I think in this market as well, what I've found is understanding the shifts within the business too. So really getting to know your clients, going back out and seeing them. Like I love being on site. What is changing, what's going on there. There's loads of AI and automation coming into manufacturing. So how does that change the landscape of what we're recruiting for?
But, I don't want to keep labouring the AI point, because I'm sure people are actually kind of getting bored of talking about it on podcasts. But actually, what you've just described is the reason why you will not be replaced by AI, because you are understanding and getting under the skin of what your clients' needs are. And we talked off camera, and there is a relevance to what I'm about to say as you listen to what I'm about to say now, that you've got clients that are, quite fastidious, and I think you used the term old school, in sort of not being sort of flexible. So, and then you and I talked around kind of boundaries. So just you're not going to give away who the client is here. Give me the scenario of what we talked about, because it's something that I want to talk about, because I think it's really relevant.
So I think one of the things I learn as a leader by dealing with the businesses that I deal with is what works and what doesn't. And there's so much noise, isn't there, at the moment about flexibility and being good to your staff, and paying people well, and and all of that stuff. And I think as a leader sometimes you can get lost in that. So we're with a client yesterday who's very, very straight to the point. If you have a day off sick in the first week of working for him, that's it, is done. If you're late in more than twice in that first week, that's it, he's done. But he preps people right from the offset and says, from the offset, this is where I'm at. And he sat and said to me, first time I've met him, he's like, I must sound like an awful boss. And I was like, actually, I don't know. I think the bit is you set your boundaries off from the offset, and some people will work with that and some people won't work with that. And he's like, look, there's 2 versions of a boss. You're great with me and I'm brilliant with you. You're not great with me and I'm not. And I think maybe part of what I've learned over the last sort of 4.5 years having the business is sometimes my boundaries within the business have been blurred, because I've had staff come to me and then you hear the noise of, that they're off sick, or that there's been a problem, or, the world falls apart, and I've gone, okay, well, I'll pay you. And then the results haven't quite then, and I think there's times when I've given too much and then pulled it back in and then gone the other way. And actually, I think probably part of what I've learned with mistakes with staff has been sometimes blurring those lines and those boundaries actually creates my own problem. So yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because
it is,
especially when you're a people pleaser.
Yeah, well, the thing is, and also just to finish off this particular example, but you said this particular leader has got that worked for him for 10, 15 years. So it's the loyalty. But I think we don't talk about this enough, that when we go and see a client sometimes as a recruitment client, and we'll talk about, what's your culture, hybrid, are you in the office full time? And they'll go, oh yeah, we're relaxed about it, blah, blah. And then you place somebody, and it's actually that the candidate calls and goes, actually, it's not 3 days a week working from home. They're actually expecting us in 4 days a week. And it's like, why not just say that at the start?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then we've got some clients that are like, actually, we're full time in the office. It's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
We're in 8:30 till 5:30, and then everybody's out the door. I'm like, great, because that way then it's about setting expectations. And the reason I wanted to talk
100%.
about it, and I know we were talking about it a little bit flippantly before I started recording, is I think it's really important that we do talk about it, because I think where we're at now is that there's so much dialogue around all work-life balance and, hybrid and this and that. It's like, actually, if you as a leader want to get the most productivity and the most retention of the best people, you need to set the expectations and
100%.
communicate that at the start.
Yeah. I mean, as I said to you while we were talking pre-recording, working with a business coach now, and the communication plan is all around that of what the goalposts look like, what the boundaries are. This is what we want from the business. For me, I've always said, look, you can have the flexibility and the freedom providing the results are there, but then following up on that when the results haven't been there, actually then is kind of sending a different message out to the staff of, well, actually she doesn't really care, like if the results aren't there, she's not, and then pulling it up when it's too late has been a problem too. So it's kind of, I suppose for me, I've probably learned, I want, for me, the things that are really important, the flexibility and freedom around the kids, absolutely. I still want parents that, want to come and work with me and have got that flexibility and freedom around their children too. But what does that look like in practical? And actually, if it's having an impact on the business, it's got to be dealt with initially. And I think, the people pleasing bit of your job is what makes you great at your job, isn't it? The people pleasing bit as a leader is probably the bit that I've gone, I can't do that anymore. No, and that's not, and I've not been a great leader because of it.
Well, that's super honest, and it's real respect for you for saying that about yourself. And I think that shows, that you are obviously reflecting on feedback and situation that's happened. But I think speaking about it generically, I think it's very easy to be a people pleaser when we are in a people industry. That is what we do.
Yeah.
We can't please all the people all the time. And I think I can't actually ever remember talking about this specifically on all the last 5 seasons in that we have to set expectations that, if you think, if you're listening to this and you're a parent or you've got a pet, you do not expect your child or your pet to have a misdemeanor without there being a consequence. It's the firm but fair mentality. And it's very similar when you are leading a team or even just one person or a massive global team. It's the respect that you will follow through with what the consequences are. And that could be punitive, but it could also hopefully be reward and incentive. And I think, just from I think that the communication is key. And I'm really pleased that we've talked about it, because I actually think it's why people call me Emma.
Yeah.
Call me because the expectations aren't being met. And it's why people leave relationships, because expectations aren't being met. And I say it's the first thing that anybody should do when embarking on a new job, taking on somebody, starting a new relationship, whatever it might be. Set the expectations from the start and keep communicating that, transparent. One of the things I wanted to pick up on is that you've shared very honestly your journey as an entrepreneur and as setting up a business. And I've written down the word mindset, because it must have been really bloody hard to start a new business, single mom, COVID, then we get that. That second lockdown in the January of 2021 was horrific.
Yeah.
It was awful. It was like the dark, cold months. So what have you done to protect and then maintain a positive mindset? And you can be as honest as you want here.
Yeah. So, I have done like on a personal level, and it's definitely helped with the business, like cognitive therapy behaviour. I knew that there was quite a lot of stuff that I'd gone through in my childhood and past that kind of needed unpacking. And I think that's one of the things that, again, makes you really good at your job and an overachiever, because it's like, right, we'll just straight into work. And I think when I think about kind of everything since I started the business, so, lockdown with a 1 and a 3-year-old was hard. Setting the business up with the boys turn, sort of Freddie's turn 2, as so the business was kind of getting up and running, and kind of when I look, and then obviously separated with Ben 5 months into having a business, being homeless was really good fun. Then we had a war, And then the Queen died, and when you think about everything that has gone off in the last sort of 5 years post COVID, and I think you just have to, I walk through the door when I come into work and go, right, leaving that at the door. The next 4 or 5 hours, whatever it is, I've got to focus on delivering for my clients, delivering for my team. Don't get me wrong. I mean, last year again, there was loads of personal stuff that went off, and forever grateful for the team that I'd got. Last year, because they really had my back while that personal stuff was going off, and that allowed me to step back and be able to deal with that, and then get back into the business and then kind of deal with the business. And I think it's just one of those things that you control what you can control, and what you can't control you just have to let go. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned last year was doing one thing at a time as opposed to trying to do everything all together.
All the time. And actually, I do want to bring in you can mention or not mention the names, but the business coaching is that you've got somebody who's external to the business, but whose sole purpose is to support you and to allow you to coach you to get through those things. So I think that's something that every business owner should have. I think everybody should have a coach.
Yeah, and I think, it's the same as when you go to the gym, isn't it? You get the best out of it with somebody there pushing you and guiding you and pulling out your flaws. Same with the business, kind of having somebody there that looks, helicopter view and goes, actually, let's take all the emotion out, because it's my business, I'm going to be emotional about it. There's no other way, it's also my livelihood, it's my children's. So you kind of look at it and the great thing with having somebody that external is there's no attachment to people. So we're looking at facts and figures and going, is that person performing? Yes, we really like that person and they're lovely, but is that person performing or not? How are we doing with that person? Do you know what I mean? And it's breaking it down, desk by desk, person by person, and and actually are they giving you back that what they're taking away. And I think again, sometimes that just having that soundboard, that person that, as a member of staff, you have a bad day, you sound off to your friends, your partner, whatever. As a business owner, you have a bad day, you start having that safe space to do so.
Unemotional and objective, and that analogy is actually really useful, because your PT ain't doing the burpees for you. You're doing the burpees, right? You're doing the work. But without that guidance, I always think it gives you that framework to sort of go back to when they're not physically with you, because a coach isn't with you every day, but it's about giving you that fundamental structure. And I'm really grateful for you for sharing that, Emma, because I think it's really useful. So before we finish, one of the things that again we talked about off camera was headcount versus growth, because I think as a supplier to the recruitment industry, I'm seeing a real shift in focus on people, which sounds like a bit of an irony, but actually it's about strategy hiring now, and it always has been for me. So where are you at in terms of what's your sort of plan in terms of growth for the business?
So yes, it's really funny. So when I've looked at kind of the 4 years that we've had, our best times have kind of been 4 or 5 people within the business in terms of profitability. Last year I really pushed to grow, so we did a show. I brought 4 new people into the business in various different roles, and I sat back at like Christmas and went, what am I like, why like we're at 9 people, and don't get me wrong, you hear your clients going, oh my god, it's amazing, you're doing really, really well. People on LinkedIn are like, you've said it to me, wow, how have you got to that? Do you know what I mean? And actually I kind of sat there at Christmas and went, what am I doing this for? Like, we're less profitable. I'm spending more time dealing with people's drama.
Absolutely.
I'm coaching, training, developing people through, which I genuinely love and enjoy that bit anyway. But I sat there and went, well, we're less profitable. I've got more stress because I've got more overheads. So we've gone from overheads of, actually, if we have a really, really bad month, I know I can bill that amount to pay everybody, personally bill that amount to pay everyone's wages, to now I've got to work, and I was putting my kids into after school club and before school club more. I was spending less time doing the things that I enjoy.
The reason why you're doing it.
And actually, again, managing people and people's performance isn't the bit I really enjoy, and it's not the bit I like. And I kind of sat there and went, how do I either, and again, the people pleasing bit of me. How do I have these really tough conversations with people actually that you're not hitting the marks? And it, and so we kind of started open January with 9 members of the team. We're now at five, or five as of next week. And actually, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And there was a part of me at the beginning of the year that was like, oh my God, I can't shrink the team down. What will people think of me? People will think that we're not doing very well, and and it's really. But actually, there's a couple of naturally 2 people have gone. I'll probably replace one of those, but actually, right now, it's the size of the team is good. It's under control, and I'm back to doing what I love, which is billing.
And that, I'm so glad you shared that, and thank you for allowing us to do that, because I think this bit of the pod, so many listeners will resonate with them, and I think more leaders should be honest and open about that. It's not about being fixated on headcount. It's about growth, and it's that growth comes from profit, and it comes from growing your market share, doing what you enjoy. Otherwise, what is the point of setting up your own business? So, Emma, I'm forever grateful for you sharing everything, but that in particular is a real golden nugget. And I think the podcast might have to be called something to do with why we shouldn't be people pleasers.
Yeah,
it's just something you're older anyway.
Yeah, it's about being true to your why, isn't it? I set up to have a balance with my kids, to enjoy what I do, and to genuinely love recruitment. Like I love it when a client sends me a message and like, candidate you've placed has been promoted, or they've settled in really well. Do you know what I mean? It's that bit for me. It's making sure that we're not throwing off stuff, and I might not ever be a millionaire out of it, but that's okay.
But that is okay. Shout that louder. I've always professed that. It's about creating opportunities for people and, making people have better lives. And for me, your why is the most important why. You're doing it for yourself and your family. So thank you for joining us on the Recruiters